Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And welcome back to another episode of Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives, like this Bestech Vigil, designed by Kombu in collaboration with the alien from Alien vs. Predator. Okay, just kidding. But it was designed by Kombu, and it is some insane design language. You see, when I asked Bestech if they would send this my way for a review, I did so because it was different, not because it was like every other knife. I wanted a chance to really see if they could pull it off. If they could pull off the crazy design language and also make something that was enjoyable to carry. I spent the last 2 weeks answering those tough questions. And now that I have, there's really only one question left to answer. Is the Bestech Vigil a Grail? Or is it garbage? All right, everybody. So diving right into it, for those of you who are uninitiated to Grail or garbage, the way this works is that we have 5 categories that we are going to be doing the judging on. Those 5 categories are materials, ergonomics, the Fidget Factor, locking mechanism, and then lastly, fit and finish. Each category is worth a max of 10 points. Let's go ahead and dive in. Once again, if you have skipped forward, this is the Bestech Vigil designed by Kombu. Let's talk a little bit about the first category. First category is materials. Now keep in mind, everything is weighed against the price. For example, I will be more impressed by a knife that is made with higher quality materials at a lower price than a knife made with high quality materials at a high price. The higher the price tag, the higher the quality materials I expect to see. This is how we justify things when we look to buy them, and this is how I justify things when I look to rank them. So, as far as materials are concerned, we have an M390 blade, titanium body, titanium backspacer, and matching anodized screws, titanium pivot collar, steel lock bar insert. It's titanium and M390. M390 is an excellent blade steel, great edge retention, good corrosion resistance, and titanium, of course, is the status quo when it comes to high-end materials for handle scales, pocket clips, and backspacers. Now, what does this cost? Well, the retail value is somewhere around $350, but nobody pays MSRP for these, okay? If you were to go on Knife Center right now, you would see that these are listed for $297, unless you're looking for the one with Damasteel. The Damasteel variant costs over $600. So, yeah, it's a hefty price tag, but what you're getting on here is great materials. For just shy of the $300 price tag that you can expect on this knife, titanium and M390 is better than average, but also around what I would expect. If this knife were to cost less, say $230, $240, even $250, I might be inclined to give it a higher score, but at the $297 price tag for materials, this is going to get a very solid 8 out of 10. Moving on to ergonomics. How does it feel in the hand? Can you grip this bad boy? Does it feel comfortable? Well, on this specific knife, my hands, which fit a large size glove, do feel comfortable. Given all the different milling and design choices on these handle scales, this knife could have been a nightmare, but it's not. The chamfering is actually very strategic. The scalloping, the chamfering, and the edges being rounded out mean that it's a very comfortable grip. Also, something I want to mention is that they could have done a regular backspacer that follows the line of the body. In this case, they did not. Kombu did a fantastic job designing this backspacer to not only account for a lanyard, which you could put on here, but honestly, I think that if it's about style points, this knife gets enough style points by itself to not need that. But this backspacer comes around and rounds out the back, meaning that when you put your hand on it, there's none of these harsh angles that can dig into your hand. It actually feels very natural. That backspacer rests against the palm of your hand and means that it's very comfortable. The backspacer itself is what you would consider to be crowned, I would guess. So it's nice and rounded. It's not going to be a hotspot in and of itself, even though it had a lot of opportunity to be one. You also get a forward finger choil that does not have any jimping. And honestly, I don't think that it needs any jimping. Given all the different angles on this knife, you don't really need that extra jimping. You have jimping where you need it right here at the spine of the blade next to the tang. So you can get a nice choked up grip on here and it feels good in the hand. Squeezing on it hard does not leave any red marks on my hand, as you can see. So the ergos on this knife are great, and they're good enough to score a solid 7 out of 10. Now, this tends to be most people's favorite category, and that is the fidget factor. When we buy knives like this, we're not looking to baton with them. We're not looking to do hardcore tasks. And I mean, if it was me, I wouldn't. I mean, you do what you want with your knives. The fidget factor, how much do you want to play with it? And when you do, how easy is it to play with? Is it something that can withstand long fidget sessions? Is it smooth? Well, a couple things that we have to talk about when we talk about the fidget factor is, one, the action, and this is running on bearings. The action is very smooth. Very, very smooth. It's, I wouldn't say it's the smoothest action I've felt. The smoothest action I've felt is actually the Finch Buffalo Tooth. But it's very smooth. You don't feel or hear any grinding. The way that it came to me, and keep in mind, this is a review unit, so I'm not the first person to look at this. But the action was good. You can push button that flipper tab. The flipper tab itself is muted. It sticks out a tiny bit, but it is muted, and it has jimping right there. So you can actually push button this, or you could light switch it if you want to be more aggressive, or you could utilize this fuller. Now, this fuller was dangerously close to being too thin to actually utilize for a reverse flick or middle finger flick, but it's not. It's just enough where you can get your fingernail in there, or you can get the meat of your finger in there. And when you reverse flick it, it's extremely smooth. In fact, despite the fact that this is primarily supposed to be a flipper knife, they could have foregone the flipper entirely and gotten a cleaner body line if they had just had more faith in that fuller. And they could have done this a couple different ways, actually. They could have deleted the flipper tab and gone with a harpoon type blade and made the fuller a tiny bit wider. And then it could have been a 100% dedicated flicker. Or, you know, they could have just done it as it is, because as it stands, that is very satisfying. You know, I don't have to think about that. I don't have to look at that. I just know that if I flick my finger like that, it's going to fly out, and it makes a nice satisfying sound that you probably can't hear very well over my microphone. Is this something you can fidget with? Yes. Is it something that you want to fidget with? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Like most things in life, it's not perfect. What are the detractors, you might ask? Well, for one, the detent on this one specifically is not the strongest detent that I've ever felt. It's not the weakest one I've ever felt either, but had they made this detent a little more crispy, we would have a seriously good flipper on our hands. But they didn't. It's I would say it's a light to medium light detent. It's not very noticeable. I mean, and maybe that's a good thing if you're into middle finger flicking, because, you know, if it was a tougher detent, that might actually be harder to flick with the size of the, or excuse me, with the width of the fuller being what it is. So The fact that it is a light to medium light detent definitely helps with the fuller flicking. We'll call it a fuller flick. There we go. So yeah, fidget, definitely fun to fidget with. There's no shame in its game. It gets a 7 out of 10 for Fidget Factor. Now we're on to the lock, and you might notice that this lock is, of course, a frame lock. I love a good frame lock. Frame locks are great. One of the issues that I have with frame locks, however, are that a lot of times you have to be cognizant of how you hold the knife, because if you put too much pressure on that lock bar, nothing will happen. In this case, because of how this pocket clip is shaped, there's no issue with that. And normally I talk about the pocket clip when I talk about the ergonomics, because pocket clips often get in the way of ergonomics. In this case, it melds seamlessly with the flow of the handle scales. And because of how that pocket clip is designed and shaped, it actually helps with the lock and with the fidget factor, because it makes it so that your hand is never in the way of this lock bar. Never in the way of the lock bar. And that's cool. Speaking of the lock bar, you do have a nice bit of lock bar access right there, and it's scalloped out towards the thumb that we'll be using to release that. It does have a steel lock bar insert, which I think is great, because the steel lock bar insert is going to help protect that against wear and tear over time. Titanium against steel can wear out one of the two and make it difficult. As far as the lockup itself, we're looking at somewhere in the realm of, I would say about 25%. It's a little early, but you know, there's no issue here. As far as the lockup on the blade, that is rock solid on that lockup. There is less than zero blade play. It's very good. As far as frame locks go, it's exactly what I would expect out of a, frame lock titanium knife around this price point of $297. And for that reason, it gets a very respectable 7 out of 10. And now we're on to the category where this knife really shines. It's the last category. It is fit and finish. So here's the thing about fit and finish. Fit and finish is the opportunity that a lot of knife manufacturers have to put the finishing touches on a knife to really make the difference. Look at how many different surfaces are on just this one scale. Look at the extra detail that they put into that backspacer and the design language. That's crazy to me. It adds so much character to this knife. Look at how many surfaces are on just the pocket clip. Everything is well thought out and well executed. Just on the steel lock bar, just on the lock bar itself. Check this out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This tiny little indent right here, which creates its own surface, 7. Just on the lock bar, we're looking at 7 surfaces. And to get each one perfectly chamfered, smooth and rounded out and even is a thing of beauty. Look at this. This groove in the handle scales is continuous and matches up with the fuller on the knife. Was that necessary? No. But it makes sense geometrically, and therefore to my eyes is extremely pleasing. It's a single-sided pivot with beautifully accented hardware, backspacer, pivot collar, and it makes sense to my eyes, while at the same time showing me something that is completely alien to me, because it takes guts to make a knife that tests the boundaries of what people find acceptable. You have to take risks. There's very few knife designers out there that are willing to take design risks these days. It's much safer to create a knife like this. Black scales, thumb stud, generic drop point, stamped pocket clip. See what I mean? This is the safe route. This is living on the edge. It came to me sharp. The blade is centered. There's no pivot lash or lock rock. There's no blade play. In fact, the lockup on here is very, very, very confident and solid. It's something that makes me really, really appreciate the amount of time and effort that goes into not only designing a knife like this, but executing it. Their execution is extremely good, even for this price range. I have other knives that cost more than this that do not have this good of fit and finish. This is going to be the first knife that I give a fit and finish score of 9 out of 10 to. So, let's recap. Materials was an 8 out of 10. Ergonomics, 7 out of 10. Fidget Factor and the locking mechanism were both 7 out of 10. And then finally, the fit and finish is a very, very good 9 out of 10. You add up all of those and you get a great score of 38 out of 50. 38 is going to put it in the high recommend category. If this cost less, it would score higher. But because right now it's just shy of the $300 range, it's almost at the top of the scoreboard. There are some knives that score more. Other knives that hit the 38 category or hit the 38 score are the Concept Fenrir and the Orion Knives Scorpio. Both are knives that cost less. But even when you look at it in comparison to the Concept Fenrir, the Concept Fenrir is not a very normal looking knife, but when you compare it against the Bestech Vigil, this looks tame in comparison. It makes me wonder why they didn't take more chances. Now maybe the Vigil isn't your cup of tea, but I'm telling you, if you have the chance to handle one, you absolutely should. It's a knife that is a geometric anomaly, and manufacturing wise, what they've achieved here with all of these different angles and edges for it to come out clean is very impressive. Guys, 38 out of 50. Put it up there with the Orion Knives Scorpio and the Concept Fenrir. Do me a favor. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, boo-hoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more just like it, make sure you subscribe. That's all I got for you today, my friends. I will see you on the flip side.